Let's move on and discuss the new agency of the African Union by the name African Credit Rating Agency is scheduled to be born in September. The rating agency is Africa's bold response to what the continent's leaders and others have described as a biased and unfair ratings of Africa and its public debt, which raises the cost of borrowings amounting to an estimated $9 billion. Meanwhile, the African Export-Import Bank today issued a formal statement clarifying the recent rating downgrade of the DFI by ratings agency. Let's bring on my guest on this in Abuja studios, Professor Ken Ife, a development economist and a public policy analyst. A good Tuesday evening to you, sir. It's good to have you on the show tonight. Let's get some insights from you. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Let's get some insights from you into the Afreximbank, Fitch, and Africa Credit Rating Agency news headlines. What is the backdrop to the Fitch ratings downgrade of Afreximbank and the response that the DFI issued earlier today out of Cairo?
First of all, let's have a comparative view of what other rating agencies have said in the same breath. Yes, the Moody was Baa1, P2 before. Then you have Fitch before, BB now to F3 stable. And then you have Japan Credit Agency, which is giving A- and saying that it's stable. You have China Chenggen giving AAA, and then you have global credit rating of A. Now, these are others. I think we have to understand that the dynamism of Afrexim is being challenged because this Afrexim is breathing life and dynamism to the African agenda. Starting from their robust role in Africa continental free trade, he gave it the payment system, which obviously tries to push them to use their own currencies and exclude dollars as much as possible. You've seen how they have forayed into the South America and then Latin America and bringing them in and giving loans, supporting major development finance institutions across Africa. Those are we know that this day is coming when they will descend on them like a ton of bricks. So it doesn't surprise me. But let's look at what the contentions are. One is that they were questioning, they said that they have a weaker risk management. Then they also said that their assessment methodology for non-profit loans, non-performing loans, is at variance with theirs. So while Afrexim is coming in at about 2.6, they are looking at 7.1. The differences in methodology. And then Afrexim has stated their position. But then, that notwithstanding, all the fundamentals of Afrexim are sound. They have very strong recapitalization of about $2.1 billion out of the 2.6 paid up. They also have about strong collateralization as well, 84% of which are total. So they've got very strong fundamentals. So instead of even liquid assets have moved from 18% to 20% of their liquid assets. Shareholders fund $7.5 billion. So Afrexim, in the eyes of the shareholders, are doing well. In the eyes of everybody, is doing quite well. But as I said, this is a day that we know will come. And it's not going to be the largest. This is the first warning shot. There will be some kind of, same thing is likely to happen for some of the other ones because we know what Donald Trump is come up with. And it's just to cause maximum discomfort for everybody. So these are some of the signals that we are going to have to live with. But I like the African response. Let's have an African credit rating agency. And that will send a strong message. Africans, look at the African pension funds, over 2 trillion. Why are Africans not lending to Africa? So that will be a stimulus for people to now start looking inwards. In the same way as our response to global trade problem Donald Trump is bringing, the response is let Africans produce, process, and then trade among ourselves and push up the level of intra-regional trade. That's just a simple answer. And so you have the credit rating agency coming, but then you shouldn't exonerate the fact that Ghana was targeted because after all, Ghana is heading the AFCTA secretariat. Ghana is also making some strong moves and reforms and then holding back their gold. And then you see a massive appreciation of their currency of 50%, and then all of that. When you begin to make all these moves, you will be picked up. So I'm not surprised. But the fact is that we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that many African governments are actually part of the challenge. because it's the sovereign bonds and sovereign loans that the integrity of those is what is being questioned. And then when they started restructuring the bond, I mean, Afrexim has said their own part of it, that that's actually part of that restructuring process, even though they have their loans. So they made their position very clear. But you shouldn't jump just because Ghana and these other countries are restructuring. You automatically assume that they will have repercussion on Afrexim. So Afrexim has put a strong, vigorous defense. They have.
Yes. So to what level?
Said, these things are just the beginning.
Yes, Professor. To what level of international financial reporting standards and transparency do you think the Afreximbank conducts itself? You just mentioned a few there.
No, Afreximbank has...
Do we have any reason? Do you think there's ever been any reason to doubt what Afreximbank pushes out as is financial statements to shareholders?
Not really. Not really. They are rigorously following the international financial standards. That's not the issue. They have, and on the basis of the standards, they've done all their calculations. It's just that a case that, the supposition is that all of these people you are pouring money into, and all these sovereign loans you are giving out, and all of that they are risky. I mean, but to be honest, some of them are risky. But the fact is that it doesn't impact on Afrexim's financials. That is the point. But it's whether they are risky. Of course, they are very risky. You've seen it even in our country, Nigeria. We are having issues about the rising level of phone and the debt sustainability issues. So you do have those debt sustainability issues. But do they impact? Are they likely to impact on Afrexim? The answer is no. That's what Afrexim's position.
So that's the point. Yes. So the Afreximbank says the Fitch Ratings negative outlook was premised on a erroneous view of how the DFI, that is the Afreximbank, was set up and its loan or debt relationship with its sovereign members, whether it's Ghana, Zambia, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, and all of that. They all signate members of the treaty that set up the Afreximbank. So can you speak more to that for us? Why that is different in terms of how the sovereign debts those debts are classified or viewed by Afreximbank, different from what Fitch Ratings is looking at, which was Afreximbank described in those statements we're just showing up on the screen for our viewers as an erroneous view of the framework.
Yeah, there are two issues there. There are two issues there. The methodology for calculating non-performing loans. And Afreximbank sticks to the part that they are doing so in relation to the international financial standards. So that's fine.
The IFRS.
That's not an issue. Then the second one is the view taken by the Fitch on the restructuring exercises going on of these loans. And the Afrexim is saying that we are not part of that restructuring. We haven't given in. We have not, we haven't signed up to it. So you can't judge us based on your potential view that could cause, obviously, if they do restructure, the restructure will impact on your financials. There's no doubt about that. But whether they are actually part of that negotiation and whether they have agreed to all that, and they have their defense. And so it is far more speculative for Fitch to think and assume that all those that are being restructured and all of that, all of those issues will impact. It is still it's not valid. So that's the two arguments that I see, and on both counts, the jury is out.
Okay, but do you think the latest Fitch Ratings downgrade or cut of Afreximbank makes a perfect case for the move by the African Union to float the new African Credit Rating Agency in September? It's been talked about over the last 1 or 2 years, virtually at every fora by Afreximbank, by the FDB, by the African Union, and every other policy, trade leaders across Africa, that we get unfair ratings, and this is the time for Africa to have its own credit rating at par with Fitch, with S&P, with Moody's, and perhaps a few others, to ensure that when there's no bias when they're dealing with us on the continent, and that everything counts.
That's correct. This is the time. There's no further time. There's no more delay, because we lose over $9 billion in terms of this poor rating. And they will suffer, because when you are wrongly rated, then your cost of borrowing goes up. And look at that difference. It translates to about $9 billion of loss because of our degrading and rating of our economies and our program, the issuers, all the various parameters. So it's time for us to put our feet down and move forward and have our own rating agency. Of course, you are going to say, of what use is this rating agency to foreign sovereign lending framework? Yeah, okay, you can argue that. But the fact of the matter is that how much can we do within ourselves in Africa? We have more than $2 trillion in dollars in our pension funds. Why are we not accessing those? There's so much money within Africa that we can leverage. And then we also have partners that are more understanding and that take a longer term view of Africa, like China and all of that, that are prepared to play ball. So we have to look for friendly lending frameworks that understand and sympathize with our destiny. So it is not about condoning inefficiency. It's not about condoning poor management, governance structure, and all of that, or closing your eye to debt sustainability challenges of different countries. No, it is about fairness and equity. And I think we've had enough of it, and we just have to
we all agree.
Our own position.
Yeah, we all agree because if you rate us, if you rate me unfairly, I'm going to pay more. I'm paying more to borrow at the international market where others get a fairer cost of debt. Africa is paying roughly $10 billion more because I think Afreximbank and others, the African Union and others have looked at the books and said, look, this looks unfair, so we need to have our own rating agency that at least we have a report that meets international standards and put it on the table. So you're looking at the African Export-Import Bank clocking 30 years as a DFI and is looking to hold its annual meetings in Abuja in 2 weeks' time. How much has this DFI done for the continent, at least in the past 10 years, under Dr. Benedict Orama in the area of trade finance, funding sectoral support for whether it is in the oil and gas sector, ensuring that we have enough sustainable petrol production being done on the African continent and all of that. Talk to me on that, Professor Ken.
I think it's a long list of what they have done. And what they've done is very transformational. Setting up Energy Bank, setting up Africa, the Secretariat of Africa Continental Free Trade, developing our Pan-Africa Trading and Payment System, PAPS. Is then all activating and supporting so many development banks, because it is actually development banks like BOI, and all these banks, they are the ones that actually hit the ground running. So they've energized, and then crossing over to the Caribbean to begin to build bridges and then bring them on, and even lending to the Caribbean. When you do all this, you will not escape being targeted. That's a simple fact. And when you try to have a competing rating agency, you will be targeted. So it is bound to come. And I've said that this is a warning shot. You should expect more. So that shouldn't deter us. What matters the most is the shareholders of Afreximbank are happy with Afreximbank. Afreximbank's performances, financial performance is robust. Their fundamentals are very strong. Their capitalization is robust. So that is the point. That's what matters the most. And the sources of other funds that they can find will be found. And then we have a lot more to do looking inwards. Absolutely. And then, of course, Central World Bank, African Development Bank also, remember 4.5 years ago, when Additional was going for re-election, remember all the noises that they had to deal with that came from World Bank and all of that. And they actually have to argue that they actually have far more exposure in Africa than they themselves. World Bank had more exposure than them. So all these noises will come when you are moving in the right direction.
So you expect some noise. You expect some noise when the Africa Credit Rating Agency is eventually set up. You expect some noise.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's going to be far more. That's what I'm saying to you. This is the warning shot. You're going to see more. You're going to see more. It's just like telling, when I told you several times on your program that Donald Trump has 4 agendas. Agenda number 1 is to avoid the Third World War. Number 2 is to disturb the entire global trading system, which he's doing. And the third one is to have economic conflict with China. And the final one, which is where all of these systems are pointing to, is currency war. This is part of the whole agenda of currency war. Because when you see Afrexim pushing a bypass of dollar as a means of trading, you're going to be attacked. You're going to come. And then you're now going to the agencies that are rating, which are an appendage of the whole global financial system. You think you're not going to be attacked. You are going to be attacked. So that's going to continue. But the thing is this, is your word against mine, and in the end of the day, who matters the most is the shareholders of the bank who are happy and they're recapitalizing more and turning their pledges to cash. I mean, it's simple.
I get it. I get it. Thank you so much, Professor Kenny. We really appreciate it. I'm sure you'll be attending the Afreximbank annual meetings in Abuja. It's happening in your backyard in Abuja.
Without a doubt.
In 2 weeks' time, we'll get to sit down there and have more conversation live there. Arise News Channel will be covering that annual meetings end to end from June the 25th to the 28th. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your deep insights into macroeconomic issues. Have a great weekend.
Thank you very much.
Wish you all the best.